Welcome to our first online version of the Houston Fabric User Group. Today we have Nikola from Austria, who is going to be giving us a guide to how we can prepare for the DP600 exam. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Nikola and let's take it away.
Thanks, Khaled. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Hi from my side. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending from which part of the world you are currently joining. Yeah, happy to be with you today, and I'll try to give you a hitchhiker's guide, or let's say some essential tips about taking, if you consider taking the latest DP600 exam, which is Fabric Analytics Engineering. So, yeah, maybe it's a good idea to share my screen for the beginning. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. So before we start, just a short introduction, because we have a lot of things to cover. I'll try to keep this very brief. My name is Nikola. As Khaled said, I'm based in Austria in Salzburg, where I work as an independent data platform consultant and trainer, focusing mostly on Power BI and lately with on Microsoft Fabric, of course. You can find me on web. I'm blogging at data-mozart.com. I'm also active on social media like LinkedIn or Twitter. So yeah, feel free to connect if you like. So what's on our agenda for today? First, I'll try to explain for maybe of you who are not aware what is DP600 at all. Then we will talk about skills that are measured for this exam and for this certificate. Then I'll try to share as much as possible about core concepts and features related to Microsoft Fabric that you need to learn to successfully pass the exam. I'll also share with you some learning resources to get you ready for this exam. And finally, I hope we will have some time for your questions. With that being said, if there are any questions in the chat window, Khaled, feel free to interrupt me, and I'll try to address those questions. Or yeah,
Sounds good.
maybe
I will
yeah,
keep an
cool,
eye for the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, please put it in. And then depending on the time at the end, we'll try to get back to you as much as we can.
sure, sounds good. Thank you. So, as I promised, first of all, let's try to understand what is DP600. That's the latest exam that Microsoft introduced with introduction of Microsoft Fabric. So this exam was released, or this certificate was released. Certificate is still not released, but the exam was released somewhere in January. It's still in beta. That means if you take your exam right now, you will need to wait for results until the exam goes out of beta. So in order to get this certificate, there is only one exam. So previously, for some certifications in the past, you had to complete multiple exams. In this case, it's just one exam, which is called DP600, Implementing Analytic Solutions Using Microsoft Fabric. And I would say if your work in space that includes data analytics and data engineering, or combination of these two, then this is the certificate that you should look for. And as I said, we have just approximately 60 minutes. So after this session, I sincerely hope that you will understand which features, which services in Microsoft Fabric you need to know when approaching the DP600 with confidence. And with that being said, this is taken from the official exam page. So you need to have an expertise in designing, creating, and deploying enterprise scale data analytic solutions. I will not go and read through these responsibilities and what are your let's say tasks of the professionals that complete DP600, because you will get the access to slides after the presentation. But keep in mind, let's say from a high level perspective, that someone who thinks or who considers taking this exam should have intermediate to advanced Power BI skills for sure, knowledge of very broad scope of programming languages. So you need to know Power Query, you need to know DAX, you need to know T-SQL, you need to know PySpark, but don't be afraid. Of course, you don't need to know all the advanced concepts and details. And obviously, you need to have experience and knowledge in data modeling. But more on that later when we start breaking down all the skills that are measured for this exam. Uh, when we talk about the role of analytics engineer in a modern data analytics realm, uh, there are many opinions, many articles, videos on web that you can find that try to explain what is analytics engineer or what analytics engineer should do. I won't go deep into these discussions. So as analytics engineer who works in Microsoft Fabric, you will definitely collaborate and work together with many different roles in within the organization. So roles such as solution architects, data engineers, data scientists, AI engineers, database administrators, Power BI data analysts. So Fabric analytics engineer should have exposure to some of the skills that each of these roles possess, but also to somehow summarize all of these skills within one role, which is called Fabric Analytics Engineer. So lines are a little bit blurred here, of course, and it doesn't mean that if you pass this exam and become certified analytics engineer that you will not do some data engineering stuff or Power BI data analyst stuff. But keep in mind that at least in theory, you will collaborate with closely with all of these personas in your organization. And if we
One thing I
talk
want
about,
to ask Nicola, I
yeah, sure.
think like this is kind of a little bit of jack of all trades, but in terms of mastery, you would think this is mastery around the area of engineering plus a little bit more on the optimization around DAX and things like that, right? So it's more, it's like an analyst plus engineer, a little bit deeper into it, but I think you're kind of still working with everybody at the same time.
Exactly. So yes, you are more or less jack of all trades. You rightly said that. So you need to have like broad set of skills, not necessarily to be master of all of them, but I would say what you probably want to do is creating data visualization. So you will not probably create dashboards, Power BI reports, and so on. So your part will finish once semantic model is built, optimal semantic model is built. So that's where I would say the line is drawn between the analytics engineer and data analyst. But as I said, in reality, lines are blurred. So yeah, let's see how this role develops over time.
Sounds good. Max, if you have a question, if you could put it in the Q&A, I would take it from there.
Okay, so now let's move to skills measured. And those are the four major areas of skills that one who takes this exam should know, should learn. First is plan, implement, and manage a solution for data analytics. This is the smallest part of the exam, 10 to 15%. And unfortunately, since this is 60-minute session and other remaining areas are more important for this exam, we will not talk today about this, but you can think from a high level perspective of in this area, focus on learning about version control, so integration, Git integration of workspaces in Fabric, working with PBIP, the latest format Power BI projects. So those are the things that you may expect to get in the exam. Then the biggest part of the exam is related to preparing and serving the data. It's almost half of topics that are in exam. Implementing and managing semantic models, things mostly related to Power BI stuff. So it's like 20 to 25%. And finally, exploring and analyzing data, which is once again 20 to 25%. So in total, when you go and go through all the skills that are listed on the official website, there are 57 skills in total measured by this exam. So this is really a complex exam with a lot of topics covered. As you see, 57 so far. As per my knowledge, TP500 was the one with most skills measured. It was 49. Now it's 57. So it's even broader than previous DP500, which is essentially a predecessor of DP600. And in this session, we are going to talk about different experiences in Fabric, things like data engineering, Power BI, data warehouse, and data factory. So those are four experiences that are relevant for DP600 exam. Of course, in Fabric, there are more things like data science or real-time analytics, but since they're not part of the exam, we will not cover them today. And it's not just about the experiences, because things are overlapping here and there. It's more, let's say, trying to break down this session content to what is asked from you to do in the exam itself. So I'll try to break it down in those three big areas that we already mentioned. So prepare and serve data, then implement and manage semantic models, and explore and analyze data. Because it makes more sense, in my opinion, as you may use, for example, data engineering experience for preparing and serving data, for the data transformation, for data analysis, and so on. So it makes more sense to try to break down this content as Microsoft did for this exam and these three big areas. So what are the core concepts and features to learn? Just a one slide short overview of what Fabric is. If anyone here is brand new to Fabric, that may help you to get like this first impression what Fabric is about. So we have one lake as a storage layer and a central location for storing all the data. And there can be only one single one lake per Fabric tenant. So all your data will live in this one lake. This is storage layer. And then we have processing layer with a lot of different services, a lot of different engines. I like to call them players. Some of them we already mentioned in the previous slide: data factory, data engineering, warehouse, and Power BI. Those four in the middle, data engineering, data warehouse, data science, and real-time analytics they go under umbrella of Microsoft Synapse. And Data Activator and Power BI are separate services. Data Activator is still in preview. That's the only part of the platform that's still in preview. So Fabric is generally available, but Data Activator is not. And as I said, those three are not included in this exam: data science, real-time analytics, and data activator. So even though you want to learn Fabric, you will not be tested on these three services in Microsoft Fabric. So only those four remaining are part of the DP600 exam. So let's move on and talk about different features, concepts, and things you need to learn when we are talking about preparing and serving the data. First of all, you will be tested on ETL. Now, if you're coming from a role of traditional business intelligence developer, business intelligence engineer, or there were many different names, you're probably familiar with the concept of extracting, transforming, and loading data. That's what this ETL stands for: extract, transform, and load the data. So the first step is extract. So we are connecting to different data sources. We choose the necessary data that we need for our analytic solution. And once we connect to data source, we may need to perform some transformations on this data to make it better suited for analytic workloads. These transformation steps can be cleaning the data, formatting, removing duplicates, combining data from different sources, from different tables, and so on. So all kinds of transformations. And once we transform this data, we are loading it into a central repository, which is usually enterprise data warehouse, or in Fabric, it can also be a lakehouse. Now with lakehouse, this ETL could be tweaked a little bit. So instead of ETL, we can have also ELT, which means that extract still stays as the first step. Then instead of transforming data, we are first loading the data as it is. So we just connect to a data source, pull the data as it is without any transformations, load it into one lake, for example, in Fabric, and then we perform transformations once the data is loaded into Microsoft Fabric. So don't be confused. Those two are more or less very similar. It's just the order of steps that you perform. So it's either ETL or ELT. And finally, once you load the data, uh, nevertheless, if you do ETL or ELT, there are certain techniques, certain things you should do to additionally tune your solutions. And in this step, you will apply different performance tuning techniques. When it comes to data loading process, there are two main types that you should be aware of: full loading and incremental loading. When we are talking about a full loading, it's the process of populating the data for the first time. That means when you do a full load, you truncate all your tables and you reload the data from scratch. So the old data is lost. Uh, this may take longer to complete, especially if you handle a huge amount of data, and it's easier to implement because there is no history preserved, so you don't need to introduce any additional logic for data loading. Uh, this method is typically used when you are setting up a brand new data warehouse or brand new data lakehouse, or when you, for whatever reason, need a complete refresh of the data. And we also have on the other side incremental load, which assumes the process of loading or updating the data warehouse with the changes since the last update. In this case, we are keeping the history in place and we are updating the tables with new information. In most cases, this approach takes less time than the initial load. And it's commonly used for regular updates to a data warehouse or a data lakehouse, uh, such as daily updates, hourly updates, or whatever frequency you need in your business scenario. And it requires additional effort from your side because you need to implement certain mechanisms to track changes and in the source data since the last load. When it comes to data loading into Fabric itself, we have different possible options, and you will learn over time that Fabric is about options. So you can do one same thing, one same task in many different ways, and it doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than another. It's just that maybe it's easier for you, or yeah, you are more familiar with certain techniques or programming languages. But in exam, you will be tested on all of these options. So I will try to cover, at least from a high level perspective, all of these options. First option for data loading into Fabric is data flows Gen 2. We need to put this Gen 2 because this is different, completely different technology than good old or just old data flows that we know from Power BI. Uh, if you open data flows Gen 2, everything will look familiar to data flows Gen 1, and everything will look familiar to Power Query Editor. So if you are a low code or no code person, you will find data flows, yeah, very user friendly, because essentially you can perform all kinds of transformations without writing code. But still, if you need it, you can write M as in Power Query to additionally transform the data. Same as in Power Query, you can connect to different whole range of different data sources. You can perform transformation, and unlike with old data flows where you could just transform the data and save it as it is in Power BI service, now you can also load it into a specific destination. There are different destinations at this moment. Most important for you is that you can load the data, transform data into a lake house or warehouse in Fabric. Currently, those destinations are available: Lakehouse, Warehouse, Azure SQL Database, Custo Database, or KQL, and Azure Synapse Analytics. So probably you are not so interested in Azure Synapse Analytics, and you can perform either appending or replacement of the data that is already stored in the destination. So this is a huge enhancement in data flows Gen 2 compared to Gen 1, because now you can write data to a destination. There are certain pros and cons, obviously, of this solution that you should be aware of. Main advantages of data flows Gen 2 is, first of all, they allow self-service users access to just a subset of your data warehouse or a data lakehouse. So you don't need to expose the entire thing. Uh, they are also good for optimizing performance of your end-to-end solution, because with data flows, you will just extract your data once, and then you can reuse this data flow multiple times across different use cases. It also reduces complexity because it exposes just data flows to larger analyst group. And because you clean and transform the data within the data flow, usually this data has higher level of quality. Currently, row level security is not supported and you need Fabric capacity. So if you're not on Fabric capacity, data flows Gen 2 is not an option. Then the next one, very powerful option for ingesting data into Fabric, is Fabric notebooks. This option, unlike previous one, which is for Power Query people, this one is for coders. And when I say coders, you might be familiar with different programming languages. Fabric notebooks support four different languages. So PySpark, Scala, R, and Spark SQL. So there is something for everyone. And yeah, notebooks are, as I said, very powerful way to write code, to use markups, and yeah, execute as a whole, execute just individual cells, and so on and so on. With notebooks, it's not just about ingesting data. You can also perform transformations, as you will see in one of the next examples. So this is a very basic use case when you want to connect to an external data source with Fabric Notebook. Uh, I would encourage you to try with shortcuts. Shortcuts is another very cool feature in Fabric that we'll examine in a few minutes. But if shortcuts are not available for whatever reason, you can use notebooks to programmatically connect to, I would say, literally any external data source. And finally, once you connect to a data source, remember this ELT or ETL workflow. You can write the data within the notebook. You can write the data into a lakehouse. You can select a Parquet format or Delta format. Delta is preferable for downstream consumption, but yeah, keep in mind that you can use whatever format works best for you. As I said, the recommended way of writing data is into Delta format, and Delta format is de facto standard, not just in Fabric, but nowadays outside in also in other uh, other vendor cloud solutions. Additionally, one thing that Fabric introduces is so-called V-order. That is a special way of additionally sorting the data to achieve the better compression and thus faster data reading. And whatever engine you use in Fabric to write the data, it will by default support this V-order. Don't want to bother you too much with technical details about V-order, but keep in mind that that is a Microsoft's proprietary algorithm to additionally optimize the data during the data write process. And finally, you also have an option to load the data with T-SQL. So if you're a T-SQL person like me, I don't know Python, you can use T-SQL as well to load the data into Microsoft Fabric. The easiest way is copy statement. You see how this syntax could look like, and you can just specify the file format you want to use. Again, Parquet, CSV, whatever you want, and it also allows you to load multiple files at the same time. You can also load from other items from within the Fabric and combine the data into one warehouse. For example, I can combine the data into a lake from a lake house and warehouse, so two different items in Fabric. In that case, I just need to write this to use this three-part naming. So I need to provide first the name of the lake house, then schema name, and then finally a table name that I want to use. Usual suspects like create table as select and insert select like we had in SQL Server, that's all supported. So yeah, all of these things work in Fabric as well. Fabric pipelines. This is a feature that is used for data orchestration. So far we were talking about individual items that we are using to perform a specific type of actions. Let's say to connect to a data source, to transform the data, to load the data, and so on and so on. All of these individual pieces you can combine and orchestrate within the Fabric pipeline. So Fabric pipeline basically takes those individual single items and you define the flow of the actions that are going to happen. So for example, let's say first I need to delete the data from table A, Then I will execute my data flow to load and transform data and load it into a lake house. And then once this is finished, I can execute my Fabric notebook to perform some additional optimization using PySpark. So pipeline enables you to orchestrate all of these things, to define what happens when, and depending on the outcome of the certain step, what should come next. So as I said, three main concepts within Fabric pipelines are activities. And within activities, we have two different concepts, data transformation and control flow. So data transformation is this individual piece that we put within one action, one activity within a pipeline. And control flow is essentially those arrows between the different transformation steps that occur. You can use parameters for pipelines to support metadata driven execution, and you can also schedule pipeline runs to happen at a certain time of the day, and so on and so on. One of the most common activities that you are going to use in Fabric pipelines is called copy data, and there is a so-called copy data tool where essentially you will just connect to a data source and copy the data as it is into Microsoft Fabric. This is probably the fastest way to get data as is from a data source into the Fabric. So copy data. And I mentioned shortcuts a few minutes ago. I think this is one of the coolest concepts in overall Microsoft Fabric. So essentially what shortcuts will allow you to do, like in Windows Explorer, when you create a shortcut, so you don't need to go and open a file which is somewhere deep in your folder structure. So you create a shortcut, put it on a desktop, you double click on it, and its content is available immediately to you. Similar to that, shortcuts in Fabric work in Fabric. So you create an object in Fabric which is called a shortcut. You point it's just a pointer to internal or external location. And when I say internal location, that means other location within the Fabric. So that means if I have a lake house 1 and lake house 2, if I don't want to physically move the data from lakehouse 2 to lakehouse 1, I can simply create a shortcut which will point to a table in a lakehouse 2. And I have this table in lakehouse 1 available for querying, for direct lake, for whatever I need, like it is natively stored in lakehouse 1. So it's just a pointer. And it, of course, enables a lot of architectural improvements. But yeah, I think this is not so important for TP600 specifically. So there are multiple benefits of using shortcuts, and I'm sure you will be tested in DP600 on shortcuts. Definitely, they essentially remove the need for data copy. So you will just have one copy of the data stored at one place, and then you can use shortcuts just to point to that location. And also data movement is not necessary anymore because data will not fly from one location to another. At this moment, so as of today, you can create shortcuts to, as I said, internal shortcuts to other Fabric items. And when it comes to external shortcuts, you can create them over Dataverse, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 storage account, and Amazon Web Services. So I know that more different sources will be supported in the future, but as of today, those three are supported: Dataverse, Amazon, and Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Okay, so this is one of the things that is, I think, of crucial importance for taking the DP600 exam. And this is the organization of the Fabric Lakehouse. A lakehouse is architecture of choice in Microsoft Fabric. And don't be afraid when you hear someone talking about data warehousing in Microsoft Fabric as an opposite to a lakehouse. It's still a lake in the background. So one lake, we mentioned it at the beginning, all the data is stored within one lake. And then depending which engine you use to process the data, we are talking about lakehouse and warehouse. And most common way of organizing the data in a lakehouse is called medallion. This name came from Databricks. They were pioneers in this area. And yeah, a lot of people don't like this medallion name. I think it's easy to remember at least. And you will probably hear different terms instead of bronze, silver, and gold as separate layers in your medallion. That's why medallion name came out from. You will probably hear people talking about raw layer, validated layer, or enriched or curated layer, but in the end, it's not important if you call them bronze, silver, and gold. It's important that you understand that data quality improves over time. So it's of the worst quality in bronze layer, then it becomes cleaned and validated in silver layer, and then the cleanest, the best data is in gold layer. So let's quickly examine just those three layers that we usually implement in a fabric lakehouse. So in a bronze layer, we land data from the external sources in its raw state. So data is ingested as it is and usually serves as a repository of historical archive of source data, because we can then quickly reprocess it if necessary. It contains unvalidated data. That's important to keep in mind. And in regards to storage format, it's usually Parquet or Delta format. Sometimes it can also be CSV or JSON. Then we have a silver layer. That's the part when data from bronze layer is conformed and cleaned, so that all key business entities, concepts, and transactions are available in the form of an enterprise view for ad hoc analysis or some machine learning workloads. Here, data is enriched and validated, and it can be trusted downstream for further analytical workloads. From a data modeling perspective, usually the silver layer contains more third normal form-like tables. And again, we are storing data in Delta or Parquet usually. And finally, this gold layer represents the so-called icing on the cake. Data is structured and it's organized to support specific project requirements. This is a final stage, so the data is additionally refined and cleaned. And in the gold layer, we also apply uh, various complex business rules and logic, use case specific calculations, and so on. From data modeling perspective, when we talk about gold layer, it's usually implemented through a Kimball style star schema. Hopefully you all know about Kimball's concepts and star schema. If not, we will cover that also in a few minutes. Uh, so data is denormalized to support business reporting requirements, preferably stored in Delta, especially in Fabric because of multiple different implications downstream. Alternatively, it can be also Parquet, but Delta is preferable. When it comes to organizing the Fabric Lakehouse, we were talking about moving data across medallion layers. So within Fabric's Lakehouse, there is more than one way to move data between layers. Remember, data flows, notebooks, T-SQL, and so on and so on. So there are a few things to consider when deciding how to move and transform data across these layers. First is how much data are you working with? Then what kind of transformations, how complex transformations you need to apply to the data? How often will you need to move the data between these layers? Is it every 5 minutes or is it once per day? That can also affect final decision. And also, what tools are you most comfortable with? As I said, I don't know Python. I will probably not use notebooks. So it also depends on your skill set. One important point to remember, usually you use data flows Gen 2 to transform the data. You use pipelines to orchestrate the data, whereas notebooks can do both. So they can both transform the data and orchestrate the data. Implementing a medallion architecture in Fabric. So we were talking about medallion architecture in general. When we are talking about the Fabric, within the bronze layer, you ingest raw data as it is using either pipelines, data flows, or notebooks. So any of these options is completely fine, depending on how much data are you working with and how complex transformations you need to apply. Then within the silver layer, we additionally clean and validate this data. And for this purpose, we use usually notebooks or data flows. And finally, in this gold layer, which is enriched with additional transformations and data modeling stuff, data is exposed through SQL Analytics endpoint or Lakehouse, or through semantic model for consumption in Power BI. I promised we will talk about dimensional modeling a little bit, and Mr. Kimball. So if you work with Power BI in the past, you probably heard that star schema, all the things, star schema is the best approach and way to go with Power BI. That's true, but for those of you who are maybe not familiar with, let's say, dimensional modeling theory and how this thing works in the background, uh, two main two main structures or two main concepts in dimensional modeling are creating fact tables and dimension tables. I like to think about the dimension tables as uh, lookup tables. So basically, tables that answer questions that start with W: who, when, what, why, and where. Whereas fact tables, I like to think about them so we measure something, some event that happened at a certain point in time. So this event can be transaction at retail store. This event can be a temperature for today for Houston, or temperature for today in Salzburg. So those are different events that we are storing, and then we use dimension tables as lookup tables to explain, to offer our business users explanation about different attributes that describe this event better. Uh, Also, two concept of unique keys that we need to have in dimensional modeling: surrogate key and alternate key. Surrogate key is an artificial key that you create within a data warehouse, so it's not necessarily so usually it doesn't have any business meaning, so it's just a dummy integer that starts with one and increments by one. And alternate key is usually the business key. For example, you have a specific code for your product, uniquely identifies this product in your system, and that would be the business key or alternate key. Those keys are very important for creating relationships in dimensional model. Star schema is the basic way, and I would say the optimal way to create a dimensional model. But sometimes in reality, we need to go beyond that and create so-called snowflake models, and that includes certain dimensions that are further denormalized further normalized. Sorry, so we need to, for example, have dim product table, dim product category table, and dim product subcategory table. So more granular dimensions that are stored separately, and data is not denormalized within one table. There are different types of dimension tables that you should also learn before taking DP600 exam. Calendar dimension is something that is usually part of every data warehouse. If it's not, definitely created either using a notebook, either using Power Query. Last station is of course DAX, but it's better to have it in DAX than nowhere. And if you're talking about slowly changing dimension, that is a specific concept that is handling changes that happens to your attributes. So uh, focus here is not on slow or fast, it's on changing. So how do you handle changes to your data that is stored in dimensions? For example, if I'm a customer and I changed my address, so I moved to another city, there are different ways, different techniques to handle this change to a customer information. You can simply overwrite it, and then once someone analyzes my data, for them, I will always be at this latest address. Or you may want, and this is usually the case in dimensional modeling, uh, to implement slowly changing dimension type 2. This is important, slowly changing dimension. There are, I think, 6 or 7 slowly changing dimension types, but uh, first 3 are most important to know. So this number 2 essentially means whenever change happens to a certain attribute, we will add a new row, mark the previous row that is, so we will set valid to a moment when change occurred, and we will add a new row for this same attribute and say it's valid from a certain point in time. And then you can go back and forth and do point in time analysis. That's why slowly changing dimension concept is super important. Other concepts and features to learn when we talk about preparing and serving the data in terms of data modeling and data transfer tables, denormalization, merging and joining tables from different sources, and data cleansing. So removing nulls, replacing values, handling duplicates, and so on and so on. So those are things that you also should learn. And performance optimization topics like identifying and troubleshooting bottlenecks in your data loading process. No matter if it's a SQL, if it's a notebook, or if it's a Power Query that you use, and you need to know how to resolve some of these performance issues. I would say one of the key concepts to keep in mind here and to learn is query folding. And yeah, now we are moving to next big subtopic of DP600 exam, which is implementing and managing semantic models. This one is more related to Power BI. So if you're advanced or intermediate or advanced Power BI user, you will probably find this one more familiar. But there are certain new things that Fabric introduced, and one of them is Direct Lake. So what is Direct Lake in Power BI? First of all, I sincerely consider Direct Lake as a revolutionary feature. We can talk about Microsoft Fabric as rebranding and that some services existed and they were just renamed or something like that. But Direct Lake is really something brand new in I would say in whole data analytics world, not just a Fabric. But there are certain prerequisites that you need to fulfill in order to be able to use Direct Lake mode. First, you need either Fabric capacity, which is marked with F, so F SKU, or Power BI premium capacity, which is marked with P, so P SKU. Premium per user will not work. Just keep that in mind. Then you need a lakehouse in Fabric with SQL endpoint enabled because of direct query fallback behavior, or warehouse. So Direct Lake works for both lakehouse and warehouse. Delta format. So if you store your data in other format than Delta, let's say Parquet, no Direct Lake. So Delta table, that is important to keep in mind that you need to have data stored in Delta format. And V-ordering, I put this small asterisk here because it's not a hard prerequisite. So that means that Direct Lake will still work even though your Delta tables are not V-ordered, but performance can be worse in case that you don't have V-order tables. Why this Direct Lake is so important? So this is architecture of Power BI before Fabric appeared. So we had a choice of two options. First, default option is import mode, and preferred way of doing things in Power BI. And in this case, we go and copy the data. Basically, we are copying the data from a data source to this. I put a cube here. This is analysis services instance, and we store the data in the instance of analysis services. And from there, Power BI sends DAX queries and query the data from this analysis services. And whenever we need a fresh data in our semantic model, we need to go back to a data source. So we need to follow this line here and refresh the data that is stored in analysis instance, so to have the latest data. This approach has its greatest benefit in providing really blazing fast performance because the data is stored in memory. On the flip side, the most obvious downsides are data duplication, because you're basically creating a copy of the data from the data source in analysis services, and data latency, because in order to have the latest data from the source available in Power BI, we need to refresh our Power BI semantic model. And then direct query mode solved these shortcomings, namely data duplication and data latency, because no data is moved from the original data source, and our users always have the latest data available because data is retrieved at the query time. However, and I'm sure all of you who use direct query mode at least once will agree that performance of direct query is, well, yeah, significantly worse than with import mode. Let's put it that way. And here is where Direct Lake mode enters the stage, trying to exploit benefits and overcome downsides of both import and direct query modes. In a nutshell, that's a hybrid approach, hybrid of import and direct query. There is no data duplication, no data latency, because Power BI will read the data which is stored in one lake delta tables directly. But this time with performance of the import mode, or let's say very close to the import mode, because the data is stored in the same way as in proprietary format in analysis services, which is suitable for fast data retrieval. Now, Direct Lake is cool, fancy, and everyone loves it so far, but there are certain limitations to be aware of. First, you can query the data just from one single lakehouse or warehouse. T-SQL views are not supported. If you use T-SQL views, you can still create direct lake model, but whenever you have data coming from T-SQL views to a Power BI report, it will fall back to direct query, and then you face all the limitations of direct query. Also, for DAX query that are exceeding limits or using some unsupported features, they will fall back. That's like a guardrail. So in case the direct lake doesn't work, by default, those queries will fall back to direct query. No DAX calculated columns and calculated tables, which is not that bad maybe, and no composite model. That's as of today. So, and yes, I forgot, no date time relationship. So you can't create relationships on a columns that are of date time data type. That's as of today. These things are changing. So maybe something that I told you is a limitation today, maybe in a week or 2 weeks will be solved. So always check the list of current limitations on the official Microsoft Learn page. And two very important external tools that we are using in our day-to-day work, and that you will be tested again in DP600, DAX Studio and Tabular Editor. So DAX Studio is a wonderful free tool created by Darren Gosbell and SQL BI guys that you can use to write your DAX queries. So you can query the data through an XMLA endpoint, data from your semantic model. You can use to troubleshoot poorly performing DAX queries. So for performance tuning, you can analyze query plans. And finally, you can understand how much time was spent in formula engine and storage engine when you are troubleshooting and optimizing DAX queries. And we also have a tabular editor. Uh, for this exam, it's enough to know about Tabular Editor 2, which is a free version of this product. Tabular Editor basically enables you to manipulate tabular object model, meaning you can change different properties on your tabular object model behind your Power BI semantic model. And you can also implement certain things and certain features that are not available yet in Power BI Desktop, like object level security or custom KPIs. For that, you must use Tabular Editor. And there is a very cool feature or extension that you use from Tabular Editor, which is called Best Practice Analyzer. So once you load it into Tabular Editor, it will scan your data model, your semantic model, and it will give you suggestions how to improve the efficiency of your data model. It will catch different flaws, different bad things that you did to your semantic model, or maybe you just forgot. So that happens to everyone. But best practice analyzer will be your best friend in those scenarios. Composite models, another topic that you will be tested on. So composite models assumes that you're using two or more different direct query sources, or one or more direct query sources and import mode. So that's composite model. All imported data, everything that you import into Power BI is considered one data source. So even though I use, for example, a SQL Server table and Excel file and SharePoint list, once I import that into Power BI, that's just one single data source. And the main implication of using composite models is that you have different types of relationships. So regular and limited relationships. Whenever you combine data from different islands, let's call it that way, you will have limited relationships. As their name suggests, they come with a lot of limitations, but of course we don't have time today to discuss this. But essentially what you want to have and what is considered a recommendation is that you use regular relationships in your semantic model. So what are the best practices when it comes to composite models? First, use them only when pure import mode is not an option. set dimension table storage mode to dual because of this limitation with limited and regular relationships, and identify the appropriate refresh rate so you have always the latest data available for import mode data sources, and stick with general recommendations for optimizing direct query scenarios. Composite models are usually implemented together with the aggregations. So we have two types of aggregations in Power BI: user-defined and automatic. In the exam, you will be tested on user-defined aggregations only. The idea is to reduce the amount of data that that Power BI will query. And what is the key step here is to make Power BI aware of aggregated tables. The recommended setup for aggregations when you're using composite models is to keep the original, you must keep original table in direct query. That's the detailed one, which contains millions, billions rows of data. Then dimension tables you set to dual mode. That means the data is imported into Power BI, but at the query time can also be retrieved from the data source in direct query. And aggregated tables, you should set import storage mode to them. This is a recommended way of handling aggregations with composite models. And in this case, you can see on this illustration that I have my original table, fact online sales, which is in direct query storage mode. It's blue line on the top. Then I have those two aggregated tables that are import mode, and I have three dimension tables that are in dual mode because of this dashed line, and all of my relationships are now regular. And yeah, that's what you want to achieve. Row level security and object level security, I need to just provide you with a high level overview here. Row level security essentially enables you to limit the access to specific attributes of your semantic model. Think of attributes like a specific country, specific product, or specific color, or whatever. So there are two types of row level security in Power BI: static and dynamic. Since you will not be tested on static, I just listed their use cases and their downsides. You will be tested just on dynamic row level security, where essentially you control who accesses the data through the data model, so it's not fixed. And the main benefit of dynamic row level security is reusability, and that once you set it, you don't have to maintain it so often as a static row level security. But in the end, you are adding additional complexity to your semantic model. Okay, and object level security, unlike row level security, object level security means that you can restrict the access to a specific data structures in semantic model, namely tables or columns, or columns to be more precise. And the main difference between row level security and object level security is not just that it works on a different, let's say, direction, but with row level security, the object is just hidden from the end user. So every query will be wrapped with additional where clause to exclude to filter the data based on a condition in row level security. Whereas in object level security, this underlying object is completely obscured from the data model. So it doesn't exist. It's not part of your data model anymore. When it comes to other concepts and features to learn for optimizing and managing semantic models, there are a lot of things. Remember 57 skills measured. So DAX, first of all, you need to learn certain parts of DAX, not everything, but namely variables, iterator functions, window functions, the newer set of functions introduced recently, and information functions also are important. Other stuff that you should know and that you should be tested, or you will be tested on, are calculation groups, field parameters, and dynamic format strings. And when it comes to performance tuning, I already mentioned DAX Studio and Tabular Editor 2, and also incremental refresh, how to configure incremental refresh in Power BI. Last subtopic that we are going to cover is explore and analyze data. First, there are multiple ways. Again, remember, Fabric is all about the options. So you can perform exploratory analytics in Fabric in multiple different ways. So let's start with PySpark. Probably for proper exploratory analytics, you will use describe method on your data frame object that you create. So once you create a data frame object, you run this describe function, describe method, and you will get a quick intro to your data. So count, mean, standard deviation, minimum and maximum value within the data frame. And you can also use PySpark to group and aggregate the data, again, within the data frame. So in this example, I'm grouping the data by gender, and I'm calculating the average of age and sum of the salary per each gender. Then you can also do perform exploratory analytics with Power Query. Uh, there are certain options that you can turn on for analyzing column quality. This one is number 5, so this one here. And this will show you how many records in this column are valid, how many errors you have, and how many empty records you have. Then also column distribution. This is this nice bar chart that shows you how many distinct values, how many unique values you have in this specific column. And finally, column profile. When you turn this option here on the top, you will get information about the value distribution and column statistics for this specific column. In this case, this is sales amount. Querying data by using SQL, this is another very broad topic, but one thing that you'll probably be tested and that you should know is how to use window functions to perform data analysis with T-SQL. So window functions, in a nutshell, in one sentence, is I like to think about them like looking through the window. So I have just this set of rows that are in my visibility and perform a specific calculation over this set of rows, over this window. There are different window functions, and three key uh, clauses that we are using in window functions are over. Basically, over function defines the window. So what is the set of rows that we are going to perform specific calculation? Then we can optionally partition this by. In case we don't use partition by, then our entire result set is a window, but we can partition this by, as I will show you in one example. And this one breaks the rows into smaller sets. And finally, order by, depending on which function you are using, this is required in some cases, in some not. But those are three that you should, and they are going in this sequence. So keep that in mind. Most used T-SQL functions for data analytics are ranking functions. So row number will simply calculate. In this case, I am writing a query that partitions data per order date. So in this case, you see I have two rows that were on 24th of October 2013, but row number doesn't care. So it will just assign 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 without any rankings or whatever else. Whereas if I use rank function, and here I have 24th of October for row number, as you see, it goes like 6, 7. In this case, because in this set of rows, this one is tie basically. So those two rank as 6. So rank function will return number 6 for both of them. And the next row starts with one value skipped in between. So it's not 7, it's 8, because we have tie here and we have two 6s. And finally, dense rank works exactly the same as rank, but instead of skipping this one place in between, it will continue counting from the next one. So we have two 6s, but the next one starts with 7. Learn ranking functions. That's my friendly advice to you. And also offset functions, which you may use lag and lead, are especially useful to return the previous and the next value from the window. In this case, window is defined by customer ID. So this is my first window, customer ID 11,000. And in this case, I am performing my calculations over this small subset of data. This is lag. So lag returns the previous value, whereas a lead returns the next value in this small window here. First value, last value, it's self-explanatory. Again, returns the first or the last value within this window defined by customer ID. Other concepts and features to learn here. Prescriptive predictive analytics, classic T-SQL. So you need to know the syntax for regular T-SQL, like select from, where, group by, having, and so on, the order of where to put each of these operations, and how to query semantic models by using XMLA endpoint. By connecting with DAX Studio, you can also query the data from your semantic models. We are slowly approaching the end, and I want to share some learning resources with you. I will selfishly share my resources here. Data-mozart.com. I have a page dedicated to DP600 certification. Then also, my friend Andy Cutler has a great blog at serverlesssql.com, also blogging a lot of about DP600 topics, as well as Kevin on his blog also some useful advices and tips how to prepare and how to pass DP600 exam. Of course, those are learning resources outside of Microsoft. I assume you know that Microsoft has a dedicated learning path for DP600, so I didn't want to include it here. This is just on top of what Microsoft offers and that you can find outside of Microsoft Learn. With that being said, any questions? I will now open a chat window and see if there were any questions.
I think the first thing I want to highlight, I think Nikola gave a lot of options to follow up, and I think Microsoft's right now running a like it's the challenge isn't kicked off. It kicks off on the 19th. I just put that in the link. You could sign up there and go through the learn process, and it'll actually give you a voucher, full voucher free for the exam. If you're in the US, that'll save you like $160+. So that's a good option. And I think in terms of question, obviously one of the question, Nicola, they were asking is, was the difference between beta versus the actual exam when it comes out of beta?
Yeah, that's a good
It,
question. Yeah. So essentially, beta exams are used to collect, let's say, the information about the quality of the questions, quality of the test itself. And after Microsoft collects enough sample data for this, they can decide, okay, if, I don't know, 80% of people responded wrong on one question, maybe this question is not suitable for this exam. Or if 100% of participants answered correctly, maybe it's too easy. So it's just to evaluate the quality of the exam itself. That's the difference.
just so you know, I followed along Nicola when the first DP500 came out. I passed it in beta.
Same here, yeah.
There was a question about, does the RLS logic impact either import performance or query performance? I mean, import has nothing to do with RLS, but what about query performance,
Yes,
Nicola?
yes. Yeah. I mean, it depends. So, but it can affect query performance if you have a very complex logic implemented in row level security. Then every query that is being generated by Power BI visuals will be wrapped with this additional complex logic. So it may affect performance, query performance. But as you said, for data loading performance, it doesn't have any effect.
All right. Any other questions? If you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. And we will send out, if you join the meetup there, once Nicola updates the slides to his GitHub, we'll send a link to the GitHub to get to the slides as well. And I'll quickly find Nicola's LinkedIn profile. Give me 1 second. That's the good place to follow and continue your journey. He's an amazing resource, puts a lot of information out there. That's, I know the topic is long, there's a lot to cover. It definitely favors people that have some experience, but at the same time, you don't have to pick everything up at one shot. I think if you just kind of follow along some of the post as it coming out, pick one area and kind of take it from there. That would be my suggestion. Nicola, anything
Yeah.
you would want to add?
Yeah, my main suggestion is you don't necessarily need to have 100% of correct answers. So if you don't know Python and know SQL or vice versa, it's completely fine that you don't know some of the questions. Yeah, and good thing that is important to mention that you are allowed to use Microsoft Learn during the exam. So you can open it from your exam software and you can open Microsoft Learn. So in case you just need to check something, it's a good idea. But yeah,
I did not know that when I took the exam.
yeah, I knew, but I intentionally didn't want to use it in beta. Let's see if I fail. Maybe I'll use it in another attempt here. Who knows?
Man, if you fail, that doesn't give much hope for us.
No. Trust me, no. There are many things that I don't know.
Oh, Vivek has a question about how many attempts. I don't think there's any restriction on attempts.
Oh no, essentially not. I mean, you can't take it in beta and then take it in when it comes out of beta until you get results. So if you fail, you can take it then, yeah, as many times as you want.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Khaled. Thanks, Khaled, for hosting.
All right. See you guys soon. Take care.
See you.